the Associate Registrar at the Grand Rapids Public Museum. And today I'm going to be sharing with you a project that I was a part of 2019. And it was the repatriation of Japanese good luck flags, or Yosagaki Hinamaru. And I do just want to acknowledge that repatriation is a really complex thing, and it can get messy, and oftentimes there is trauma involved in cases of these flags. The trauma, I believe, exists on both sides. So this is just a project that we undertook, and I want to share with you, but also acknowledging that, yeah, it can get complex. So we'll just kind of jump right in. So we call these Japanese good luck flags, which is a not really a great translation. They are called Yosagaki Hinamaru, and probably a better translation is a gathering of people writing on the national flag. So you can see here, this is a Japanese flag with writing on it. These date from about the mid-1930s to 1945. And I will go into some more detail in just a few minutes about the importance of this writing and how that writing plays a role in repatriating these flags. So today I'm just going to give you a brief overview of the GRPM for any of those of you who may not be familiar with us. I'll share with you what are Japanese good luck flags and why they're important. I'll talk a little bit about the Obon Society, and this is the organization that we worked with. They're a small nonprofit out in Oregon, and they work to return items, personal items that were taken during the war. And so I'll share with you kind of their mission and how we partnered with them. I'll share with you the journey of how one of the flags from our collection made its way from collection storage back to a family in Japan. And I will also share what we have learned and what we are continuing to learn as we continue to go through this process. So like I said, I work at the GRPM. You may be familiar with this building. This is our museum building in downtown Grand Rapids, right along the Grand River. We were founded in 1854, and our collection has continued to grow, and we currently have about 250,000 scientific, cultural, and historic artifacts and specimens in our collection. And I get to spend most of my time at the Community Archives and Research Center, or CARC as we call it. And this is our offsite storage facility for our collection. So if it's not on exhibit, there's a 98% chance this is the building it's going to be stored in. This building is also home to the City of Grand Rapids Archives and the Kent County Archives. One really neat thing I think about our museum is our partnership with the Grand Rapids Public Museum School. And this is a 6th through 12th grade school that uses progressive teaching. They utilize design thinking and place-based learning. And through this, they utilize the museum as a resource for their teaching methods. So kind of one of the things that we are able to do with the museum school is that teachers and students are able to utilize our collection, and they can incorporate artifacts and specimens right into their lesson plans, into display cases. Students can incorporate them into projects that they're working on. So it's a really neat partnership that we have with them. And we are able to do this because we have a tiered collection system. And the little diagram you see here is kind of our overall goal of what we want our collection to be and what we want it to look like. And so you can see at the very top, the smallest part of our collection, eventually we want to be what we consider tier 1 artifacts. And these are kind of the best of the best. These are things that would be very difficult, if not nearly impossible, to replace. They have very significant cultural or scientific or historical value. And anything in tier 1 really is only handled by collections or curatorial staff. Then you come down to the middle. This is a bigger section of our collection. This is tier 2, which we consider facilitated access. And these are items that collections people can handle, or people that we feel comfortable with those artifacts. We've trained teachers to handle certain types of artifacts. So depending on the artifact and the teacher, they are allowed to bring sometimes tier 2 artifacts into their classroom. It might be in a display case or for a one-day project, something like that. And these are things that might still be difficult to replace, but they're usually in complete or in pretty good condition. And then at the bottom, what we want our biggest part of the collection to be is tier 3. And this is general access, or probably what most people consider an education or a teaching hands-on collection. And these are the types of artifacts that students really get to have these hands-on experiences with. And so that's how we're able to partner. One of the ways we partner with Museum School, and part of my job as associate registrar is to act as the liaison between the school and the museum when it comes to these type of requests. And the Museum School does play a role in this repatriation project, which we'll see in just a moment. So now we'll get into what we're actually here to talk about today, and that's Yosagaki Hinamaru, or these Japanese good luck flags. And located in Kark, at Kark, we do have a small collection of these. And as you can see here, this one has lots of different writing and calligraphy on it. It even has some drawings and illustrations on it, which all play a role in the significance of this flag. So during World War II, when Japanese men were drafted into service, their friends and family would gather together to show their support by signing a small Japanese flag with their names and sometimes messages of well wishes and good luck. Oftentimes, they might say something like, be brave or good strength, things like that. About 90% of the writing that they've found on these flags is simply first and last names, basically. There may be messages that say, you know, your little brother, and then their signature, or your little sister and their signature, and then some very brief messages. Most soldiers had at least one of these flags given to them. And oftentimes they may even have 2 or 3 of them. And not only would their friends and family gather, but sometimes an employer might gather the employees and they would sign a flag and present it to the soldier. Or if they were on some sort of team, you know, a sports team or something, they would get together and sign a flag and present it to the soldier. And what's kind of interesting is there's never any reference to any type of battalion or platoon or anything like that. And rarely is there anything on it that suggests that this man was part of, you know, something bigger like an army or a navy. These were very personalized flags, and every family had different traditions that they followed when they wrote on these flags. So everyone is just a little bit different. So the soldiers would take these flags and they would fold them up and they would carry them with them when they went to war. During World War II, on the battlefields, foreign soldiers would often search for souvenirs that they could carry or send home with them. And while rifles and swords were popular, one of the most common souvenirs were these small Japanese flags with writings. So if a soldier collected one of these from the battlefield, he could take it to a commanding officer where it would be inspected for any intelligence, and then basically be given a stamp to send it home, or the soldier could take it home. 2.4 million Japanese soldiers died during World War II, and even today there are more than 1 million Japanese soldiers who are still considered missing. Often these flags, for many Japanese families, are the only surviving trace of their husband, brother, or father. In some cases, they are the confirmation that their family member was actually killed during the war. They can almost act as human remains and have very important cultural and spiritual significance. So over time, many of these flags have been stored in people's trunks, in their attics, basements. They've been passed down to, children and now even grandchildren. And eventually some of these make their way into museum collections. And the GRPM's collection is no different. So back in 2015, we received a donation of some items that included a World War II newsreel, a map of Iwo Jima, and then a Japanese good luck flag. And they were donated by a local gentleman whose father served as a Marine in the Pacific Theater during World War II. Upon further research, our curator came upon the website for Obone Society in Astoria, Oregon. And Obone is a nonprofit humanitarian effort that's dedicated to the pursuit of peace, and they provide the opportunity for reconciliation between families through the return of personal items taken during war. They also work with the families who have these heirlooms and would like to return them, including these Japanese good luck flags. So Obone Society was founded in 2009 by Rex and Keiko Zeke, and you can see him here in this photo. Keiko's grandfather had disappeared during the war, and 62 years after his disappearance, his flag ended up with a collector in Canada. The flag eventually made its way back to Keiko and her family, and they believe, along with many Japanese family, that his spirit lives inside the flag and that he wanted to return home. Knowing that almost all Japanese soldiers carried these flags, Rex and Keiko made it their mission to try and return them to other families, and so Obone Society was founded. Their first successful flag return took about 4 years. And a little background on the name of their organization. So Obone is the Japanese holiday that honors those who have passed. So if you kind of think of it like we have Memorial Day, there's Dia de los Muertos, Japan has Obone, which is not a single day to honor their dead, but it's really more of a season. And for most people, it is the first 2 weeks of August. And this is a tradition that goes back thousands of years. So when it came to naming their organization, they looked not only at that holiday, but they also looked at that the atomic bombs were dropped on August 6th and 9th, and then the surrender occurred on the 15th. So they decided to borrow Obone as the organization's name, as they saw it as peace began during Obone season in Japan. The Japanese also believe that during Obone, the spirits of their deceased ancestors can return to Earth and reside with the living for several weeks. And then at the end, they'll create a large fire, which then sparks into the air, carrying their ancestors back to heaven. So over the last few years, their organization has continued to grow. And in 2019, they rolled out a more sophisticated system to find the families. This includes 17 archivists, scholars, and translators. They have another 12 to 15 people who are advisors and consultants. And they do all of the front end work. So they do the handling and archiving of the items that come to them, communicating with family members, the scholarly research, the analysis of the flag, including deciphering the calligraphy. They also have a team of about 570 people living throughout Japan, and they work with this group to do the door-to-door searches. So once all the research is done on the flag, then they actually have to locate the family in Japan. And they have to do it this way because Japan has passed some pretty strict privacy laws, so that they don't even really have telephone books. Their thought is if you want someone to call you, you're going to give them your phone number. So there really aren't any like public name listings, PO boxes, property deeds, or anything like that that can help in this situation. So that's why they have such a large team of people basically on the ground doing the footwork in Japan. In 2015, shortly after we received the flag, our curator reached out to Obone Society to gather more information about the organization and to just see what our next steps would be if we wanted to repatriate the flag. So in order to begin the process of repatriation, the flag would have to be deaccessioned so it could be sent to Oregon, and then they could begin their research process. At that time, the deaccession just didn't move forward. It was a newer accession. It hadn't been in the collection for more than 3 years, so it just didn't move forward at that point. Fast forward a few years to 2019. One of the museum high school teachers was teaching a unit on World War II, and more specifically War and Peace, and had requested various artifacts from the collection to incorporate into her lesson plan. One of the items that she requested was this flag that was donated in 2015. After talking it over with our curator, the decision was made that the flag could be brought into the classroom, but that a curator would have to accompany it due to its significant cultural value. So at this point, I had been at the museum just over a year. I was still familiarizing myself with all the nooks and crannies of our storage building. And this flag had a correct storage location, and I just didn't realize that there was an entire cabinet that I kept overlooking at the end of an aisle. So in this process, I started looking through other boxes of flags and discovered what we believe to be 3 more Japanese good luck flags and 1 possible Korean flag. Obon Society is still looking into that one for us. And while these had been in our collection for decades, I think one of them came in like 1959, and the other ones had been there since the 60s and 70s. They had never actually been photographed, and their record in our database simply just said Japanese flag. So if we were searching for them by any other name, they wouldn't come up. So this discovery kind of prompted us to take a closer look at repatriating the flags and returning them to their families in Japan. We also knew that our collections committee and our board, who has to approve all deaccessions, might struggle with the idea of deaccessioning the flags and sending them to Oregon, where it could take years to locate a family member. Luckily, we were able to work with Obon Society, and they were able to make an exception for us that they would start researching the flags as long as we could basically promise 2 things. And one of them was we had to be able to provide them with high quality, high resolution photographs of each flag. And we also had to guarantee that if and when a family member was found, we would be able to quickly pack up the flag and send it to them. And for many families, these are the closest things that they'll ever have to the actual remains of their family member that had died. And so Obon Society wants to be able to ensure a timely return of the flag. So we know that our deaccessioning process can really take anywhere from 3 to 6 months, depending on committee and board meetings. So we did recommend these flags for deaccession to our collections committee and our board, and kind of with a caveat that these are going to be deaccessioned, but they're going to remain on site until a family is found, and we'll continue to care for them until Obon contacts us with the family. So we kind of presented it almost as a conditional deaccessioning, but it was truly a deaccession. From my point of view as a registrar, all we really did was a deaccession without disposal. Those are 2 separate things in the collections management world. And disposal doesn't just necessarily mean throwing something away. Transferring it to another organization is another method of disposal. So basically, we deaccessioned it, but we chose that we were not going to do any type of disposal at that point. Our committee and board also agreed that these flags should be deaccessioned in the hopes that they could be returned. Once we actually had the deaccession completed, went through our committee and our board, I was able to send the paperwork to Obon Society so they could see that, yes, they were deaccessioned. I sent them the photos of the flags and then any provenance that we had gathered regarding the flag, and they were able to begin the research process. Within a few months, they contacted me and said that they had a pretty good idea of who the soldier was whose flag was donated in 2015. But they were hoping we could provide some more details to ensure they had the correct information and just a little more confirmation. So while we knew the American soldier's name who had collected the flag, little else was known. In this case, we did choose to reach out to the donor and informed him of what we were trying to do, and to see if there was anything he could remember about the flag, or even about his father's service, where he served, dates, anything like that. So we did get a little bit more information, which we were able to send on to Obone Society, and just within a few weeks, I received this email from them, and stating that they had found the soldier. They knew who it was, who it belonged to. They knew his name, where he died, when he died, and they'd actually located his sister, who was still living in southern Japan. I will say that was such a good day for me. I was so excited and just so relieved that a family member had been located. Since the flag had already been deaccessioned, we didn't have to wait for any board approvals or anything like that. So we were able to pretty quickly get the flag packed up and get it shipped back to Obone Society, and then they facilitate returning it to the family. They did give us about a 2-week window to get it to them, and that was because they gave us the opportunity. They said if we want to do a press release or anything like that, just to bring more awareness to these flags and the partnership and the organization, they wanted us to be able to do that. So we did that, and a local news channel came and picked up and did a short story with our curator on it. And so in early October 2019, we did send the flag back to Oregon, and I received notice a few weeks later in November that the flag had made its way back to the soldier's sister. So I just want to share with you what we've learned and what we're continuing to learn, because we still have more flags that they're researching, and it seems like every one is a little bit different. Every situation is a little bit different. So the first thing is, if you have any of these flags, to locate them and unfold them and try to store them flat, making sure to interleave them with acid-free archival tissue. And this is because they're usually made of a pretty lightweight material. Sometimes they're silk or like a really light, thin cotton-like material. And so they can, because they've been folded for many years, the fibers can start to break and wear down. So you just want to get it flat, and sometimes they have holes or tears in them. And sadly, some of them do have blood stains, which can also cause the fibers to start to deteriorate. So just making sure you have kind of a proper space to store them. I would begin researching the flags, pulling any donor files or accession files you have on them, and just trying to gather as much information as you can about the flags you have in your collection. You may choose to reach out to donors or the donor's family. In the case of the flags that we have left, all the donors have passed away, and many years ago passed away. So I think it's everybody's own choice, and it's situation dependent on if you choose to reach out to them. Things like this can open up a lot of old wounds and a lot of trauma for people. And so just, be aware of that if you do choose to reach out to any donors. For the one we did repatriate, we did reach out to the donor, and that was because, we felt comfortable with the situation. Our curator had had previous conversations with him, and that was the route we chose to go with that flag. Currently, we have 2 flags that they have requested more information about. And because the donors have passed away many years ago, we're trying to pull our resources to and do some more research right now to send to them. So one thing I think that's really important if you do talk to families or donors, things like that, is that this, the Obone Society, this isn't about ever bringing shame or embarrassment or anything like that to anyone involved in this situation. It's really about peace and reconciliation. And they want that for both sides. So I think that's something really important to convey if you're talking to donors or, children of donors, things like that. You'll want to make sure you have open and honest conversations with your collections committee or your board or whoever it is who makes these type of decisions. And just make sure they have a firm understanding of these flags and what they can represent. In the museum world, we use artifacts to tell stories, and these flags really do have amazing stories to tell. Sometimes I think we just have to take a look and ask ourselves, are they our stories to tell? Do we have to have the object on site to tell that story? These flags, to me, they're not static objects. Their stories continue on, and their repatriation now becomes part of their story, even after they're deaccessioned and not on site anymore. So I think that's something that can be really impactful that you can convey to the people who make these decisions. You'll also want to review your deaccession policy. So in order to deaccession something from our collection, it has to meet certain criteria. And one of the criteria that we have listed is that it is illegal or unethical provenance. So these flags are not illegal to have. For us, we felt it just fell more under unethical provenance. And so that was the criteria that it met in order to recommend it for deaccession. And then I would just, if you have, have these in your collection or need further clarification or questions, reach out to Obone Society. They've been a great partner to work with over the past couple years. I've learned a lot from them just in general about these flags, about Japanese culture, and that type of thing. So they're just a great, I think, organization to work with. And there's their contact information. And I just want to point out these two pictures here. These are flags that have made their way back to Japan and kind of some of the ceremonies that some families have when the flags come back. And the photo that you see on your right, there's an older gentleman in a dark gray suit, and he is a World War II veteran. And the flag on the table is the one that he collected from the battlefield. And so with the permission from the Japanese soldier's family and the help of Obone Society, he was actually able to travel with the flag and present it back to the family a couple of years ago, which I thought was really kind of a neat story. And to date, they've been able to send back about 380 flags and personal items. So that's really all I have for my presentation, and then I guess we can just go ahead and open it up to any questions or conversations.
Thanks, Sarah. I got to hear it last week, and then I got to hear it today, and I appreciate the presentation and the slides and the just your approach as well. So I know that there have to be some questions, so go ahead and put any questions that you might have in the chat. I will tell you that Sarah has given me a copy of her slides, and I will send those out after the program, and then also a copy of the deaccession form that we thought people would want to know about. So the first question has appeared from Dan. Were there any objections to repatriating the flag?
Not really from our board or our committee. I think we're pretty lucky right now with the collections committee and the board we have. They can be pretty forward thinking when it comes to things like this. But yeah, for the most part, their big thing we knew was going to be deaccessioning it and just sending it off to another organization where it could continue to sit for many years. And so we were able to luckily work with Obone Society to kind of circumvent that in our situation.
So I'll chime in. Sarah knows this already, but we did have someone post on the Facebook page when we posted the event. So we had someone add a comment, and then they pulled their comment, and then I messaged them. So I've been having a conversation with them. And the person that posted was a veteran, and he is a museum person and works at a Michigan museum, and really had some concerns with it, and really felt like that that there was not necessarily an understanding of what it means to take things during a war. So I think that, so I'm continuing to have that conversation with that person, and it's a very, I don't want to say valid, but it's a very good conversation. And that person has been very respectful and positive. So I'm hoping that we can bring that perspective to this conversation in some way as well. And I don't have the memory detail of the message. I took a quick screenshot of it, but just a real concern about, and as Sarah mentioned at the beginning, you know, repatriation is tricky because, you know, we are stewards of collections, and you know, the idea of institution accepting an artifact and then giving it away, you know, that doesn't go over well, you know, in all circles. So I just thought that the person brought up some valid conversations, and we'll try and bring that to the conversation a little bit at some point. They weren't comfortable coming and talking in the webinar. So now we have some other questions. And so Dan also said, did you begin to look for other war trophies in your collections once you found this one?
I wouldn't say we're actively looking for them, but I think we are much more aware now of the significance of them, and what they, you know, going through this process once already, really having a better understanding of what these type of items mean. So I wouldn't say we're actively looking. It might be something we should probably maybe start digging into a little more. Oban Society deals basically with you know, Japan. That's their go-to. So I don't know if there's even other organizations out there that are doing this work for, you know, other countries and things like that. But that's a really good point to bring up.
All right, Christy has 2 questions. How are you handling any prospective donations of Japanese good luck flags? And will you talk a little about your Goodwill find?
Yeah, so we did make the decision after we deaccessioned these ones that we would no longer accept any more into our collection. And I think this kind of goes back to even reviewing your collections management policy too, along with your deaccession policy. So it's, you know, states in our collections management policy not to take anything with unethical or illegal provenance. But obviously this is, you know, it was a newer collections management policy. We didn't have that policy in place in the 60s when these flags came in. So I think that's really important to look at. But yeah, we made that decision kind of as a team afterwards, that anyone who came to us with those, we would direct them directly to the Oban Society. And if they wanted to move forward with them, that was up to them. Oban is really great about they're never going to force someone to do something that they're uncomfortable with. So they'll tell you, you know, if you're not ready to part with this flag or this item, or if you have, you know, there's sentimental value there for you or a connection to your father or grandfather, don't send it to us, because that can sometimes cause more trauma and things for the person sending it back. So they'll never like push anyone to do anything they don't want to do. And oh, the Goodwill find, this was a really interesting story. So a few months after we sent that flag back in October of 2019, I got a call from Rex at Oban Society, and somebody had come across online, Goodwill, the store, the thrift store offers, they have a website that has an auction on it basically for more higher end things or collectible things. And somebody had come across one of these flags on this auction site for Goodwill, knew what it was, contacted Rex and said, can you get this flag? Like, how do we get this off this auction site? And so Rex was able to contact Goodwill, and they immediately said, oh, we didn't know what it was. We'll take it down. We'll send it to you, but it's in this professionally framed glass frame, you know? And that's like not what we're really, we don't have experience in doing that, like taking that out and shipping it. So he said, well, where are you located? And it turns out that this flag was in Grand Rapids. Somebody had donated it to Goodwill fairly recently, they think, probably from the greater Grand Rapids area. And so we were able to go to Goodwill, pick it up, unframe it, and ship it back to Oregon. So I don't know if somebody saw the news story about it and recognized what it was and just didn't want to have to deal with it anymore. But hopefully there's not too many of them floating around on like eBay and stuff like that. I think Obone has worked with a lot of these online auction sites to not have them up on their sites. So yeah, that was kind of an interesting thing that happened within a couple months. So.
All right, so Andrea asks, was it difficult to get them to make the exception to allow it to remain with you while the search happened? What was that conversation like? And if the museum was committed to deaccessioning the flag immediately, was there a consideration of sending it to the Obone Society?
So I will say we did have to talk with them quite a bit about making that exception for us. We are the exception and not the rule. So their normal policy is they have to have the flags on site to begin that process. For the most part, they are working with families and individuals though. So it's a little bit different situation. What they don't want to happen is a family to say, I have my grandpa's flag, here's all the information on it, here's the photos, I'm going to hang on to it. Then they do the research, they find the family, and then all of a sudden the family's changed their mind and won't send it. So we are definitely the exception. I can't say that they would do it for every museum, but it's worth a conversation. I mean, they've been nothing but helpful and for us. So definitely worth a conversation if that's something you want to move forward with. And if the museum was committed to deaccessioning the flag, was there a consideration to send it? I think our curators have kind of been at the museum and long enough and have worked with our committee who makes the initial recommendations to our board for deaccessions. They know them well enough to know where there's going to be a hiccup in things. And I think they just did a really good job of kind of making it work for both ends. I think, we do have a very forward-thinking committee, but we knew that if we said we're gonna send it back, as soon as it's deaccessioned, that maybe could have been the difference between deaccessioning and not. So I think it was a consideration, but our curators were also really great about presenting it in a way to the committee that they knew they would understand. Because the deaccession flags remain in the museum's custody, is the school still able to access them for lessons? So that is a great question, and we still actually have all of these records available on our collections database, so you can search them and there are high resolution images of them. We haven't had them make this a request for any of them again. One of the things I was concerned about, and I asked Rex and Keiko, is it appropriate for these to go into the classroom? What can we do and what can't we do with them? And they take a very neutral stance on this. And as an organization, they say, we're not going to tell you what you can or cannot do, but also keep in mind, if you were a Japanese person who had a family member who died during the war and you didn't know if they were still missing or dead, and you saw this maybe on exhibit or somewhere out in a public space, how would that make you feel? So as an organization, they're not going to tell us what we can and cannot do. No one has asked to see them again. I think each situation is a little different. So I think it would depend on what class it was going to. It would be probably some lengthy conversations between the museum and the teacher to see if it was kind of an appropriate fit, or if it's something where they could go onto our database and see it there. So we don't actually have a straightforward answer. I think it's a case by case situation.
Any other questions? Any thoughts or perspectives on this process or the project? I will admit, when Sarah first mentioned, she said, oh, we have this repatriation project that we think people might be interested in. And my first thought was, NAGPRA. So I thought, oh, that's good. NAGPRA is always a good thing to talk about. So I was honestly surprised, and my mind was opened, right? When Sarah brought this up, I never really thought about this type of repatriation. So anybody have any thoughts or observations that they wanted to share?
It looks like Felicia had a question. Did you hear anything back from the family it was returned to? No, we did not. And that is common. Sometimes the families will have like a big ceremony at a local kind of like shrine. Other times it's a very, very private thing. Each family is different. So we did not hear anything back. We did send, along with the flag, a letter from our museum and signed by our director, basically just stating like, we were a temporary home for this object, and it was an honor and a privilege to care for it while it was here, and we hope it can bring you some peace. And Audubon Society was able to translate that letter for us. But it's really the family's choice if they choose to send anything back in response. Do you know what other objects Audubon has been able to return? So they deal with personal items. So I think they've been able to maybe do some photos or some letters and things like that. I think their main focus has been the flags, but they do other items too.
Again, we're going to stay here for a few more minutes. We'll stay till 2, so don't feel like you have to run away. And if you have a question that came up or something that you thought about, you can keep that conversation going. But for those of you that are wanting to get to the next thing, I wanted to give you that chance to do that. So thank you for coming.